I want to welcome everybody to this episode, what we call Seeding the Future, in collaboration with the Socrates program at McMaster and the McMaster Children and Youth University. I wanted to introduce at this time Stefan Weber. He's a conservational biologist with Carolinian Canada, and he specializes in studying rare plants. Stefan has worked in habitat restoration for nearly a decade and is currently completing his PhD at McMaster University. Go ahead, Stefan.
So I'm really excited to be talking to you this morning about the importance of seeds and the power that seeds have. As you know, plants are the foundation of all ecosystems on land. But where do plants come from? Well, they all come from seeds. And how is it that a plant makes a seed? And what is a seed for a plant? So if we want to create habitat for wildlife, we need to start with seeds. And even just a handful of seeds contains potentially thousands of little new plants. The photo on the right is a pile of acorns. That's about 1 ton of acorns, which are oak tree seeds. And these will be used and spread across a couple hundred acres to create habitat and to create baby forests of oak trees for the future. But where is it that all of these seeds are really coming from? So all seeds begin as flowers on a plant. So through the process of pollination, plants reproduce to create seeds and then spread their seeds around the landscape. But the first step is that the plant needs to be pollinated. And in many plants, this is done through an insect pollinator. So I'm going to walk you through this process if you're not familiar with it already. The first step is that the flowering plants will create a flower, and often these flowers are very showy and colorful, and sometimes they smell really nice in order to attract a pollinator. Sometimes those pollinators are birds, but usually they are insects. And now each flower is full of grains of sticky pollen, and the pollen gets stuck to the pollinators that carry them away where they land on another flower. And the pollen is able to combine its DNA with the DNA inside of ovules or eggs at the base of the second flower. And through this combination, the flower creates a baby plant, and that baby plant is wrapped up inside of a seed. And so you may have seen seeds inside of the fruit that you're eating, inside of apples or inside of a peach or something like that. A cherry pit is a seed. And so these seeds are then encased in fruit, which will attract an animal like you or me or maybe a squirrel to carry that seed away and to disperse it on the landscape and to plant it. So almost all plants on Earth produce flowers, whether they're showy or not. And the most, common flowers that we're used to are really attractive and they smell nice, such as these plum flowers. So these flowers will, through the process of pollination, turn into fruits, and then we can turn those fruits into things that we eat, like jam here. But there are also flowering plants that don't create sweet, fleshy fruits, such as grasses. They create grains, and a lot of trees like oak trees, which will create an acorn. So if we need pollinators to help produce some of our favorite foods, then it's really important that we conserve pollinators throughout the entire year and not just when our crops are flowering. So to do this, it's really important that we have wildflowers on the landscape to support these pollinators. And so how do we do this? If we want more wildflowers on the landscape, how do we create more of them very quickly? So it's a fairly straightforward process. We go out into the wild and we find these wildflowers and we collect a small amount of seed. And instead of scattering these seeds in the wind and letting them germinate wherever they land, we give each seed the best chance we can possibly give it. And we grow it almost like a crop, like corn or soy or beans or tomatoes. We grow a big field of it, and we give every little plant the best chance we can so that it creates that much more seed. And in this way, we can farm wildflowers just like we farm any other crop. And therefore, indirectly, we can farm wildlife and we can create more pollinators where we want them. So here's a field of butterfly milkweed that's used to support a lot of different insects, but in particular, monarch butterflies. Now, some of you may know that um, the life cycle of a monarch butterfly depends entirely on the milkweed plant. And without milkweed, we would have no monarch butterflies. So before they turn into butterflies, a caterpillar must eat a lot of leaves, and it can only eat milkweed leaves. And then it will pupate and turn into a butterfly. But without this milkweed, we would have no monarch butterflies. But there are other animals, other butterflies, that have this same kind of specialized relationship. The checker spot butterfly depends only on turtlehead, which is a marsh wildflower, in order to lay its eggs. The giant swallowtail butterfly can only lay its eggs on two different shrubs, the prickly ash and the hop tree. And so without these native plants, we would have no giant swallowtails. There's also many bees that have this kind of relationship, such as this tiny little bergamot bee can only feed its young the pollen of one species, wild bergamot. But it's also important to remember that adults and young insects may need completely different plants. So monarch caterpillars need milkweed, but the adults need to eat nectar from asters and goldenrods in the fall in order to fuel their migration south to Mexico. So these are very important plants for wildlife, and they're actually blooming out in the wild right now. And I wonder if anyone has seen some asters or goldenrods. They're very beautiful, and there are even rare plants that support monarchs as well. So when you plant them, you're supporting not only a rare butterfly, but also a rare plant, such as this dense blazing star. And when you start gardening with native plants and adding more wild plants to the landscape around you, you'll notice all kinds of very, very fascinating insects show up, such as this leafcutter bee and this swallowtail caterpillar. And the more insects you have, the more birds you have, because insects make amazing baby bird food. So if you want more songbirds in your landscape, the best thing to do is to plant more wild plants in order to support the food chain that will allow for more birds. So before I wrap up and we have a bit of a discussion and I take some questions, I just wanted to talk about two really cool programs that I'm involved with Carolinian Canada and the World Wildlife Fund. This is called In the Zone. It's a gardening program to encourage people to not only use wild plants, but to track the impact of their garden on conservation, which is something that traditionally has not really been done in the conservation world. So we have a garden tracker, and you can sign up your garden for free. It's fun, it's easy, it's a good thing to do with your family to explore your backyard. We will ask you things about what kinds of habitat you're growing in your backyard, what kinds of wildlife you've seen, how many new native plants you've planted this year. And the great thing about this is that you can update it as often as you want. So if you put in a pond next year, or if you plant a tree, you can add those changes to the tracker. And currently we have over 5,000 gardeners on the In the Zone program that are tracking their gardens. And then the second part of In the Zone program is the plant tags. So it's very important that you're choosing truly wild and truly native plants when you're doing your wildlife gardening. And to make this easy, we have teamed up with local growers across Southern Ontario that grow plants from wild seed, and we've used our plant tag to help them indicate that their plants are ecologically appropriate and the best choice for wildlife gardening. So these two things are a really great way to help Canada grow its habitat for wildlife. So I think I will stop there with my presentation, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions and a lot of things that we'd like to talk about. So I'll pause there for a minute.
So maybe I can ask the classes if anybody has a question for Stefan. Go ahead, Miss Wilkinson's class.
Hi, my class wants to know if monarch butterflies eat anything besides milkweed.
That's a great question. So the caterpillars can only eat milkweed, and the caterpillars are the baby monarch butterflies. So first they're a caterpillar and they can only eat milkweed. But once they turn into a butterfly, they can actually feed from a number of different plants, including goldenrod, asters. They can feed from things like brown-eyed Susans, and also blazing stars are really pretty plants. So the adults can choose from a wider variety of plants than the babies can.
Miss Alabakapoulos' class, there's a hand up there.
In my class would like to know how he can grow wildflowers.
That's a great question. It's actually pretty easy. The first step is to get your hands on some wildflower seeds. So I would recommend growing milkweed because it's very easy to grow from seed, and it's also very easy to find and to collect the seeds at this time of year. So often there will be milkweed growing around the edge of a park, or you may even have some in your neighborhood. Just make sure you ask whoever owns the land if you can pick the seed. But the seeds will be inside of a pod, sort of a greenish pod right now, and you can pick it and you can take those seeds and you can plant them right now, because wildflower seeds need a winter period because they are so used to having a fall and a winter. They need to be cold before they will germinate in the spring. So if you plant them now, you do have to be patient and wait until next spring. But that's the best way to grow a wildflower seed, is to collect it in the fall and plant it as soon as you collect it. And I would probably recommend putting a popsicle stick or something in the ground next to your seed so you remember where you put it.
Great. Stefan, can I just ask you to maybe stop sharing the screen and turn your camera on, if that's okay, so our young people can see you? And I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be sending little bookmarks with wildflower seeds embedded on them to all the classes that participated. So if the teachers could get in touch with Rebecca, she's the person you've been interacting with, we'll arrange to get the bookmarks to all the classes, okay? You had a question?
One time I saw a monarch butterfly in my backyard.
That's awesome. Do you remember if it was visiting a flower?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, monarch butterflies at this time of year have mostly migrated out of Ontario, but if you're lucky, you still might be able to see one. But that's really cool. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Hi there. So my class would like to know, where do you see the butterflies? She has seen them here in Hamilton, but where else can we see them?
What type of butterfly was that? I didn't catch it. I think you cut out a minute.
She's talking about a white kind of butterfly.
Okay, so that might be something called, they call it a cabbage white, because it can only lay its eggs on cabbage plants and things related to cabbage like broccoli and cauliflower. So that's another really cool example of that specialized relationship between one plant and one insect. But I think the little white ones are called cabbage whites. That's cool.
And where might you see those other than in Hamilton, Stefan?
You're most likely to see those near a vegetable garden or near a farm, actually. So if you've got a veggie patch or a community garden, that might be a neat place to see them.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, okay, we have two questions. One question from a grade 3. She is wondering if there are any poisonous butterflies.
There are no poisonous butterflies. There are some caterpillars that if you ate them, they would be poisonous, but we don't eat caterpillars, so that's not a problem. And there's also a few caterpillars that are fuzzy, and if you touch them, they can kind of make you itchy. So if you see a fuzzy caterpillar, don't touch it. Generally, if you see a caterpillar, you should leave it alone and not touch it. But if a butterfly lands on you, for example, it can't hurt you. So the butterflies are not poisonous.
Good to know. And a question from a grade 2. She is wondering if the butterflies migrate anywhere other than Mexico.
The monarch butterflies do not. So all of the monarch butterflies basically in the world will all migrate to the same mountain range in Mexico, which is one of the reasons that they're so threatened, is because they all go to one small area. And if anything happens to that area, the population gets disturbed. So yeah, all the monarch butterflies migrate to one spot.
Miss Wilson?
Hi there. Is there a type of rainbow kind of butterfly with lots of colors?
Well, not so much in Ontario, but there are a lot of different colored butterflies. So you can get 5 different butterflies with 5 different colors. And the way you do that would be by planting lots of different types of plants, because each butterfly needs a different plant. But the most colorful butterfly, I think, is the tiger swallowtail, or maybe the Baltimore checker spot. Those are very colorful. Some of the really colorful ones are tropical butterflies, and so they don't live in Ontario.
Miss Wilkinson's class?
Hi, we have two questions too. One is, if a pollinator is doing its job, can it only go to wildflowers, or can it go to flowers that were planted?
So it's a very good question. It's a very complex question, so I'll try my best to give you a short answer. So a lot of the plants that we plant have been specifically cultivated so that they have large ruffly flowers, or they have like strange shaped or brightly colored flowers. And to do this, they have to sacrifice how much nectar those plants produce. So often the ruffly giant flowers don't actually produce any food that the pollinators need. They may not even have reproductive parts. So it's best to go with plants that have not been modified very much. So that typically is wild native plants. But you can also choose things like, if you really love roses, that's great, but go for an open saucer rose rather than a double ruffle rose, because the shape of the flower is easier for the insect to get into, and it still is going to produce nectar. I can potentially send some other resources around to help answer that question, but by and large, wildflowers are much better for pollinators.
All right, our second question is if there are any poisonous plants that would maybe hurt a pollinator.
Hurt a pollinator? No. The insects are remarkably smart. Maybe we forget that sometimes, but they know exactly what plant they're looking for, and they know exactly what plants to avoid. So some plants, if a caterpillar ate it, would taste bad, and so the insect would move along. But we don't generally worry about the insects being poisoned by poison plants. But for us, we want to make sure that we're not eating plants that we don't know what they are. And we want to make sure that we always recognize what poison ivy looks like, because that's probably the most poisonous plant in Ontario. So Yeah, don't worry about the pollinators, but make sure you know how to identify poisonous plants that may hurt you.
Ms. Depew, your class had a question for a while. I'm sorry it took a while to get to you. Did the question go away, or is it
No,
still?
it looks, thank you. It looks like has a question. Can you turn on your microphone, please?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Monarch butterflies are poisonous. Insects eats them. They're poisonous.
Are you asking if they're poisonous?
No, I know that they're poisonous.
Okay, you're telling us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, one of the reasons that the monarch caterpillars eat milkweed is because the milkweed produces a poisonous sap that the caterpillars can eat, but then it makes them poisonous to birds and other things that might want to eat the caterpillar. So that's a really, really good point. Thank you for sharing that.
Ms. Young's class?
Hi, okay, we have a couple questions. I'm just gonna put the microphone up to my friend here. Go ahead. Do caterpillars sometimes sleep in the dirt? He's just wondering if caterpillars sometimes sleep in the dirt.
That's another very good question. So many caterpillars will spend the winter in the leaves on the ground. So it's important that you don't rake up all of your leaves. Leave your leaf piles in the garden because many caterpillars will either overwinter as a caterpillar in the leaves in the dirt, or they will turn into a chrysalis, into a pupa, and then spend the winter in the leaves. So that's a really good point. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have another question, if you guys don't mind. One of my grade 2 students is wondering why caterpillars cuddle up into a cocoon.
Good question. So they need to go from a caterpillar, a little squirmy worm, into a butterfly, this big thing with papery wings and all kinds of colors, right? That's a huge transformation. So what happens is they create a pupa around them, a chrysalis around them, and then it's sort of kind of like Alien Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but the caterpillar will rearrange all of its body parts. It will liquefy, kind of sounds gross, but totally rearrange itself so that when it comes out of the chrysalis, it's a butterfly. It's absolutely amazing.
Miss Willier?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions. One of our questions is, how long do butterflies live?
Some butterflies don't live very long, a few weeks, but some butterflies can live a few months. So the last round of monarchs that leaves Ontario to go to Mexico will actually live and migrate that whole distance in one life cycle. But when they come up from Mexico, they do it in short stages. So it's actually several generations it takes them to get up. So even within the same species, different individuals will have different life ranges. It's actually pretty neat, but every species has a different age.
Thank you. Our second question is, the seed coats on some seeds are so hard. Are all seeds able to break through their seed coats?
What a wonderful question. So often the seeds that are inside of fruits, like fleshy fruits, apples and pears and cherries, they have really, really hard seed coats because they actually need to be digested by a large animal. So a rhino or a horse or something like that. And so the reason they have that tough seed coat is to protect them from the stomach acid in the stomachs of the animals that eat these fruits. And so if you want to grow these things without having a rhinoceros eat them, you often have to sand off that seed coat, at least on one end of the seed, with sandpaper, or sometimes we can carefully take a knife and nick that seed coat open. And if you nick it open just a little bit, enough for water to get in, then the seed can germinate. But that's actually a very fascinating question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Miss Young's class?
Hi, I have a question from a grade 3 here. Do butterflies mate to have eggs?
They do. Sometimes in the midsummer, you might find two butterflies that look like they're stuck together, and they will actually fuse for almost a day sometimes, at least a few hours, and they will fly around together. So I did have a picture of some monarch butterflies that were connected to each other, and that's how they mate.
Thank you. And we have one more question, if that's okay. A grade 2 student here is wondering where butterflies like to live.
Butterflies really love shrubby plants to hide in during rainy days or windy days, but then they also love big open meadows full of wildflowers for them to eat. That's like a smorgasbord to them. So if they see a big field full of goldenrod, that's like a buffet. But in terms of sleeping, they need sort of piles of wood or really dense shrubs in order to hide in.
Miss Depew's class?
Yes, thank you.
Why are caterpillars and butterflies each called antennas?
Can you say it one more time? Why do caterpillars and butterflies what?
Why do caterpillars and flies ears are called antennas?
Why are their ears called antennas?
That's a cool question. So they kind of are like your ears and my ears, in that they pick up information from the world, but they pick up different kinds of information. So our ears hear sounds, but the antennas are kind of like an ear and a nose and like a satellite dish, like on the side of a building to pick up satellite signals from space. So it's picking up more than just sound, I think, is probably the easiest way to explain it.
Thank you.
Miss Wilkinson's class?
Hi. There's a question about where you can find wildflower seeds. And could you purchase them at a garden store?
Sometimes you can. Sometimes wildflower seeds are hard to find at stores, but Carolinian Canada and the In the Zone program has a list of suppliers and growers that are certified Ontario native plants. So you can kind of cross-reference that. There are a few in the Hamilton area that could supply some wildflower seeds to you. But if you visit Carolinian Canada's website, they will have a list.
Miss Wilkinson, do you still have a question, or is your hand still up from before?
We are just having no Canada. The other question was how butterflies travel. Do they prefer to travel over land or water when they migrate?
Well, I'm sure they would prefer to go over land, but they have no choice sometimes. So monarch butterflies have to cross Lake Erie in this part of the world, and they don't go around it. They cross right over, but they will go as far as they can. They go to the tip of Long Point, which is actually, it's a peninsula that's halfway in the middle of Lake Erie. So they go to the tip of Long Point to make that journey shorter, and then they cross the lake there. But then they also need to cross the Gulf of Mexico. And so they'll leave from various places from Texas to Florida and then cross into Mexico that way. But it is astounding that such tiny, delicate animals can travel all night over the ocean. It still baffles my mind, but it's pretty amazing. They have no choice. They have to go over the water.
Miss Young's class?
Hi, we have 2 questions. One grade 3 student is wondering how butterflies get the patterns on their wings and things like that created. So where does the pattern come from?
Well, through the creative process of evolution, through natural selection. Often those patterns are a combination of mate attraction and camouflage. So sometimes The outside of the wing is camouflage for the butterfly to hide, and so there's certainly natural selection that would drive a butterfly to hide from its predators. But then sometimes the insides of the wings will have a brighter color pattern, and that actually helps closely related species of butterflies tell each other apart and also tell males from females. Yeah, there are a variety of reasons that butterfly patterns are the way they are, but it all boils down to natural selection.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then one more question from a grade 2. She's wondering, how do bees get the pollen on their bodies when they're pollinating?
Good question. So the pollen from insect pollinated flowers is always sticky. So this time of year, many people have pollen allergies, and they blame goldenrod because goldenrod is everywhere and it's so colorful and it's obvious. But goldenrod pollen is actually sticky and it can't be carried in the wind. It's meant to stick to the body of bees and butterflies, and that's how they carry it around. So at this time of year, your pollen allergies are caused by ragweed, which is wind pollinated, and not by rod, which is sticky and insect pollinated.
And maybe the last questions will come from Miss Alabaka-Paulus's class.
Thank you. In my class wanted to know how you can tell if a butterfly is a girl or a boy.
Good question. In some cases, you can tell by the pattern on the wings. So males and females will have a slightly different patterning, different numbers of stripes or spots or colors. In some cases, there is no obvious difference, and you would need a microscope.
Does your class have any more questions?
Yes. My class was wondering if you might know what type of butterfly has markings on its body that look like eyes. She's seen one that looks like eyes on its body.
Yeah, there's a few in Ontario that have those. My favorites are called the satyrs or the wood nymphs. They are named after, mythical fairies, but they are small brownish butterflies, and the outsides of their wings have little eye spots on them. Yeah, very, very good observation.
Okay, we'll take one last question from Miss Young's class.
Thank you. I have a grade 2 student wondering if all butterflies are the same shape.
Oh, yes, actually. Some of them have little tails on their wings, and this is usually for mate attraction, but they're different sizes, big butterflies and small butterflies, but they all are pretty much the same shape.
Great. Thank you everyone for attending, and I just wanted to thank Mr. Stefan Weber for providing us with a really nice discussion about wildflowers and pollinators in Ontario. And maybe what I can ask is if the teachers want to, we can ask the students to sort of look around their neighborhoods and their gardens and see the kinds of plants they see and the kinds of pollinators they see. And if you want to draw some pictures and send them to McMaster Children and Youth University at mcyu@mcmaster.ca. We'd love to feature some of these pictures on our website. You can always reach out to us through that email address if you are interested in additional learning adventures, as we call them. So once again, thank you, Stefan, and thank you to all our teachers and classes, especially the kids. Thanks for asking so many wonderful questions. And we really hope you enjoyed today's session on wildflowers and pollinators in Southern Ontario and the Seeding the Future program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.